Hi everyone, I'm Erica Callahan, and for our book review, I read Transitions Making Sense of Life's Changes by Dr. William Bridges. It is the second edition that had a few decades in between, I believe, the first edition, so I feel that's important to point out. Bridges has made a career out of examining transitions, and this is his first book that really catapulted that career change from his original career, which was that of a literature professor. So his book is riddled with anecdotes about himself as well as the students that he's worked with. But what this book is really about is examining what transitions are, and that has to start with a definition. So transitions are something that are internal and psychological. They deal with your inner world. And they can be surrounded by changes, though. Changes are what happen in your external world, in your surroundings. So, a change might be that you get a new job, or you have a baby, or you lose someone who's close to you. And the transition is the internal process that accompanies that. And while that will obviously look slightly different from individual to experience, there is a three-step process that Bridges identifies as being the process of internal transition. And he gets this from studies of theory in psychology, sociology, anthropology, and really grounds his work in that, as well as his anecdotal experience and research into it himself. And so this three-step process is defined by, first, endings. So yes, transitions begin with endings, then the neutral zone, and then beginnings. So in endings, this is something that is kind of hard to grasp at first, and often why people struggle with transitions, because if you chose a change around you, if you chose to change careers, if you chose to get married, if you chose to go to college, those seem like positive changes, and it is hard to admit sometimes that something is ending, that the person you defined yourself to be before those changes is coming to a close. And so that's why endings are really important to first identify, because if you come to college, like our students do, and most of them are choosing this for themselves. They're excited for the opportunities, they know that this is the right step they want to take, but something about it is really hard. Something doesn't feel right. And oftentimes it's because they're ready to build something new without saying goodbye to the old. So they're coming to college, often removing themselves from their community, their support structure, the ways of knowing that they had before. And in this transition, that is an end. It's not losing completely everything, but it is disconnecting from what existed before the change. Then the second portion of a transition is the neutral zone, which I feel like a lot of us can understand as being sort of that empty place. Being self-reflective, maybe you've experienced it yourself, or maybe you've had a student who sat in front of your chair who has said that they feel like they don't know where they're going, that the plans they had are not their plans anymore, and they don't know what their new plans are, that something about them feels different, and they can't shake it. This is all part of the neutral zone. And in the neutral zone, while it may feel like emptiness, Bridges describes as being part of the really hard work, because it involves being with yourself in thought and reshaping the ways that you've defined yourself by searching for new definitions. So while it may seem like wandering and emptiness, really a lot of work is being done to search for new definitions, new ways of understanding, new ways of meaning. Then lastly, there's beginnings. So transitions end with beginnings. And that's when all of the work from the neutral zone of that exploring comes into play. You start to question, what was that nagging idea that I can't get rid of? What is that opportunity that someone mentioned that maybe before I would have passed, but I can't get it out of my mind? What is it that really motivates me? How do I search that? How do I follow that? And so that's what the beginnings are. And from the beginnings then becomes possibly even more external changes. If you feel that in the neutral zone you've discovered a new career path, well, that means that you might be changing your major. That means that you might be going back to school. That means that you might be dropping everything to move to a new location. So the moral, I guess, of the story is that transitions happen all throughout your life, and that they never stop. Just because you have decided on one thing does not mean you will stay the same or your situation will stay the same. And transitions continue to happen. Now, I'd say that while this book was written for individuals who may be a bit older than myself, than the students we will be typically working with, maybe individuals who we describe at middle age, to even in the afternoon of life, as Bridges says it, the transition process stays the same, which is really the meat of the book. So while anecdotal evidence may be about marriages and careers, which we definitely will have students who face those challenges, the earlier transitions are talked about in sort of a remembrance way, as in remember when you made the transition into adulthood and independence. But still, learning about the process itself is incredibly helpful. One of the downfalls, though, of the book, I would say, is Bridges' heavily reliance on literary references. So, because I majored in English, that's what my first degree is in, I can dive into a 5 to 10 page analysis of the Odyssey as a transition story, but not everyone can. And that's not going to be something that will be easily accessible to all of our readers. And the epilogue is an entire story of Psyche, the Greek tale. And so, while he's relied heavily on what his first career was, it may not be super accessible to everyone. But overall, I think that the book did a great job of giving very clear and concise directions towards what is possible for you to apply to our work. So, at the end of many of his chapters, he ends it with prompts and with questions that we can easily apply to conversations with students. So once we understand that our student is in the neutral zone, then we can ask them, what ideas keep reemerging? Although it feels like you're wandering, does something keep coming up? If it is something about beginnings, and you ask, what is it that really motivates you? If it's something about endings, having them reflect on what endings looked like for them before, so they can understand their own personal process. These are all recommendations that I just pulled directly out of the book. So the theory to practice of it is very accessible, which I very much enjoyed, because over the past only 2 days of having our students come onto campus, I have referenced this book in the way that I talk to students at least 3 times. Granted, this is a transition program where I am transitioning them for 3 weeks into the Curry College community, so it may be a little more applicable, but I truly do believe that as students go through transitions in their career, having a good understanding of what that internal process looks like is something that we as student affairs professionals have the ability to do. So yeah, the book itself, a great read, and I believe will be very helpful to be both self-reflective for myself as I move into my career and in this very moment as I work with students.